President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all sectors of society to organise men's dialogues during the 16 days of activism to eradicate gender-based violence. In his weekly letter to the nation, Ramaphosa says that these dialogues must be focused on changing the attitudes of men, as they are the perpetrators of violence against women and children. He says the government, NGOs and the private sector should be encouraged to support such dialogues. Ramaphosa has stressed that the social plague affects every aspect of society, including health and well-being, safety and security, as well as economic growth and productivity. The president says he is ready to participate in the men's dialogues and has called on political, community and religious leaders to do the same. Joining us now is Director and Clinical Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation, Dr. Shaheda Omar. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Shaheda. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Thank you.
So we are currently observing 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children. And perhaps as we look at the fact that the murder and rape of women and children remains stubbornly high, what is your view of anti-sexual and gender violence awareness campaigns like the 16 Days of campaign and its efficacy?
So if we look at the 16 Days of Activism, we are proponents of 365-day campaigns, not 16 days. Yes, 16 days could highlight many of the challenges and where to access resources, a reminder of the plight and brutalization that women and children are faced with, and the powerlessness, the helplessness, and the hopelessness of the situation, and motivate and propel people to take action. But I don't believe that we should just focus on 16 days because that is not sufficient. But again, in response to your statement of the president highlighting the importance of engaging men in dialogue, and I think it's not just men, I think it's the whole society. Yes, certainly we need to bring men and boys into dialogues, into conversations, and to actually engaging around the challenges, but also looking at what role they could play, what responsibilities do they have to society. So bringing them into solution mode where they come up with solutions. There's a sense of ownership, a sense of addressing the interpretation and understanding of masculinity, because I think that's often misunderstood, and the misperception around masculinity, whether there's confusion around assertiveness and aggression, that the two are used synonymously. And those are things that we need to address. Also, feeling and appreciating and actually getting into the shoes of mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, all the females in this world, what they go through, their fears, their anxieties, walking on the street, or even not feeling free to dress or walk or do anything that they would like to, that they would normally do, or that would be expected of any human being, and based on human rights, that they are not allowed to express their rights.
Yeah, absolutely, which actually you've touched on my next point, because to eliminate the scourge, reduce it even. I mean, we really fully have to understand both the structure and systemic gendered inequalities that continue to perpetuate the status quo, that produce both the perpetrators and the victims. And to date, the issue of data analysis has also come to the fore, because it seems you can't also apply a blanket approach, given the different information coming through from different provinces, amongst other, variables. I wonder how you would weigh in on that, how government in particular is doing to combat that.
So if we look at, as you've discussed here, because you're absolutely correct, if we look at the different provinces, look at the hotspots like KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, and then going into deep rural disadvantaged communities where there are so few resources that are available and accessible. So in terms of that, I think there is work being done, but at the pace it's being done is not adequate, because we are still seeing that in these marginalized communities, women continue to be plundered, brutalized. So it needs to be accelerated at a faster pace, where budgets, resources, personnel, training, skills-based personnel are placed in these positions to respond. The first responders are equipped and empowered, but also a lot of awareness raising to communities in these areas, how they can access resources and interventions, because a lot of them don't even have access to transport to enable them to report things or even to actually contact a toll-free line. They're not aware of the existence of that. So again, in terms of accessibility, availability, and putting money to it with trained skills, resources, etc., is something that needs to be accelerated, amplified in these communities.
Dr. Shaheda, on that note then, what do some of the interventions look like going forward so that we don't come back next year and, repeat the conversation again? So as we're looking at some of the factors that contributed, including substance abuse, alcohol abuse, perhaps even the role of religion that perpetuates some of the toxic masculinity or the status quo. How would you weigh in on those also being contributing factors to the macro problem?
So you've identified the systemic issues, the anomalies, the flaws that we are, and the gaps that currently exist. And on a systemic level, these are things that have to be addressed on a micro, meso, and macro level. And the theme for this year is unite. So we all, it needs to be a collective effort, a disconcerted effort by all government stakeholders, civil society, community-based organizations, but I think the important thing is, in the past, men and boys have been identified as the problem and the many challenges that we've seen manifested. So it's bringing them into this process, bringing them into this journey of ensuring ways of eradicating the scourge of violence. I think this is something that is critical, but if we do this properly on different levels, you mentioned faith-based organizations, and in the Children's Pre-Summit, what the voices clearly articulated, the importance of religion, regardless of what faith one belongs to, but to allow faith-based organizations to engage, communicate around the very issues of gender-based violence and femicide.
Absolutely. We'll leave the conversation there, but it continues for now. Dr. Shaheda Omar, Teddy Bear Clinic Director, really weighing in as the country observes 16 Days of Activism campaign that kicked off on the 25th of November.